Okay, welcome to Successful Employment Negotiations, how to overcome feelings of panic and powerlessness that some people feel, especially if you haven't done it much before, since it's pretty much impossible to negotiate salary for an internship. My name is Robert SanGeorge. My day job is that I'm graduate student career advisor for the School of Public Affairs, and I do a bunch of other stuff too, but that's probably enough for now. And I'm going to plow right into this and proceed fairly rapidly. Your microphones are not open. That's because I've learned through hard experience that if we open up people's microphones, we hear dogs barking and ambulances going by people's houses, and people's family members yelling at them, hey, how come you didn't do the ditches and stuff like that. So, however, the Q&A and the chat in Zoom are both open. Hopefully you can see how you can access them and ask any questions you like. If you ask a question about something I'm going to be discussing in an upcoming slide, I'll ask you to be a little patient. And if you have a question about a slide that I've already gone past, don't worry, ask the question. I'm happy to go back, no problem. So with that said, let's get going. So here's what we're going to talk about today. When to negotiate, doing relevant research on salary, understanding the concept of the midpoint, which is pretty easy to understand, but really crucial to know when you're negotiating salary. Various negotiating tactics, how to put together a relevant one-pager that is not a resume, but just says, here's how much experience I have for each position I've held, and total it up at the bottom as a way of making a case for you making more money than they have offered you, okay? What is a master's degree worth if you're a graduate student or a graduate level alum? What does that mean in terms of salary? And what actually is negotiable besides salary, okay? In terms of benefits. So certain kinds of benefits are not negotiable. We'll get into that. Others are. And then how to accept a job offer once you've negotiated something. And by the way, if you are in the School of Communication, School of Public Administration, College of Arts and Sciences, I hope I haven't skipped one. The main AU Career Center is available to support you. And if you're in COGAD, you have your own career center that can support you in this kind of work. And I believe the SIS Career Center can do that too, for those of you at SIS, okay? So let's get going. Now, one of the biggest issues people have in entering salary negotiations, let's say you're going to be entering your final semester as a senior, or maybe you're not going to do that for a year, or you're about to be finishing your master's degree, and you haven't done much, if any, of salary negotiation. It's very common for people to feel powerless, like whatever they offer me, I just got to take it. I need a job. Most recent graduates, as I say here, who get an offer tend to feel panicked and pressured to accept the first thing they get, okay? It's under these circumstances, it's essential that you market yourself, that you assume a posture that's not arrogant or overconfident, but is reasonably confident and reasonably decisive about your worth. And it's equally important in this, of course, is very important in salary negotiations. When is the right time to negotiate? Never until you have gotten a clear verbal job offer, okay? You don't want to be starting to ask about salaries, in a first round interview on the phone with an HR person, which is usually a very preliminary discussion. Now, they may ask you, and it's unfortunate when employers do this, what kind of salary were you thinking about? Mainly because a lot of employers are nervous about wasting their time with someone who really wants to earn 30% more than they're going to offer, for example. And in the case of that issue, it's always a good idea to go into say a first round and definitely a second and third round interview with an idea of how much a position is likely to pay. How can you find that out? There's a really good way to do it for medium-sized and large employers. It's on glassdoor.com, okay? Just the way it sounds, glassdoor.com. They have a function where you can put in a job title. So you've applied for a job and you know what the title is, and you can plug in the name of the employer and the city, like Washington, D.C., and it will typically come up with a range in which of salary in which that job will pay, i.e., $50,000 to $60,000. Okay, more if it's a more experienced position or if you've got a graduate degree, that sort of thing. That you plug in all these variables into their very simple database, and it comes up with recommendations based upon salary information that it is gathering all the time. Mostly algorithmically, automatically. And it's a pretty good, system from glassdoor.com. The one problem is a really small employer probably is not in that system. However, you can nonetheless say, okay, I'm up for a job as a research assistant in Washington, D.C., and I've got X amount of experience based upon my internships or maybe jobs that I've worked at. And this is I'm going to have a bachelor's degree or I'm going to have a master's degree, and what kind of salary might it pay? And you'll get a pretty good idea. One thing to understand, though, about the issue of employer size and salary is that the bigger the employer, generally speaking, the better they pay. And the smaller the employer, generally speaking, the less they pay. I don't know whether, I can't remember whether I talk about this later in the presentation, but I might as well do it now. In DC, you're talking about for-profit employers, the government, particularly the federal government. You're talking about government contractors, many of which are very large employers. And then you've got the nonprofit sector, which is huge. The federal government employs something like 1.3 or 4 million people in the DC area that's not counting people who are military. The government contracting sector employs something like 900,000 people in the DC area. The nonprofit sector employs something like 600,000 people. Now that's just the district, Maryland suburbs, and the Northern Virginia suburbs, okay? You may be looking elsewhere, and definitely if you use that Glassdoor database, which you should, you're gonna wanna be saying what city it is because salaries will vary. In a very small city, salaries are gonna be less than they are in larger cities where it costs more to live. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have more money, as I'm sure most of you realize from living in DC, even if you're making a fair amount of money. But those are factors that you have to take into consideration. So getting back to my first point, you never want to discuss anything about salary. Never bring it up yourself, okay? You may want to inform yourself using Glassdoor in the way that I've mentioned, but wait for the employer to bring it up. And some employers may well not bring it up. Your point of maximum leverage in salary negotiations is when they've made a verbal job offer. I was a senior executive through much of my career before I came to AU about 14, 15 years ago, and was often in the position of making job offers. And I have to tell you that, it's a long sometimes it's not long, but it's a torturous process in the sense that you get a lot of candidates, you narrow it down to a certain number of people you interview, and then you narrow it down to whom you want to offer. And once you've done that, you want to get it out of the way, right? It's on to the next thing, because, for anyone in a management position who is, reviewing people for job candidates, they have to do that on top of everything else they have to do every day. And so it's a hassle. And most people don't like doing it that much, even if they're pretty good at it. The only people who are actually paid to do that on a regular basis are the human resources people. And it's possible that you may be directed to an HR person who makes the offer to you, in which case they usually have very little flexibility on salary, and you'll have to be a little bit aggressive in those situations. But your point of maximum leverage is when you've gotten that verbal offer, because the employer doesn't want to open the the search back up again. That's the last thing they want to do. They want to, they're psychologically, they're done. You're just about hired. They're thinking about the day that you're going to walk in the door, and they don't want to, reinitiate this process. So don't discuss compensation or benefits while you're interviewing unless the employer demands it, as I say there. And if you're forced to discuss salary, you want to talk about range, magic word, range. I'm seeking a salary in the $50,000 range or the $60,000 range or whatever. Okay. Range at least implies there's some latitude there, which also, by the way, if you were to set a salary level that you're interested in that's higher than they were thinking about, that implies that you're willing to compromise. But it also implies if you're thinking too low, that you might raise your salary expectations. Okay, so the important thing here, though, is once you get into a salary negotiation discussion, you want to know, if the employer will discuss it, what the salary band is for the position you seek. Now, the good news is, if you're looking for a job in the federal government or a state government or a municipal government, typically salary bands for specific kind of jobs are public information. They have to tell you, and even if they didn't want to, you could probably find it out. Now, what is a salary band? Let's just keep the math simple, okay? Let's say you're going for an entry-level research assistant type position, and the position pays 50 to 60. The band is $50,000 to $60,000 a year. Okay, that's the band. And then what you want to do is think about where you're going to put yourself in that band. That is the midpoint. Okay, so what's the midpoint? I say 40 to 50 here. Let's be more optimistic and talk about 50 to 60. The midpoint is 55,000. Okay, why is that an important concept? Because human resource professionals are taught and trained that you never bring anyone into an employer above the midpoint. Why? Because it limits the employer's ability to give you salary increases over a period of a few years. All right. What they don't want to be is in a situation where, let's say you're in that $50,000 to $60,000 band, and they give you $58,000 to start, and the next thing you know, within a year and a half or 2 years, you've hit the ceiling. Now you say, well, so what? I've hit the ceiling. They can just give me more money. Well, it's not that simple, because first of all, they'd have to change the salary band, number one, ignore the salary band, which is usually a really bad idea, because even for private employers, everybody somehow or another seems to find out if somebody's being paid above their salary band. I mean, I know this because I've dealt with this myself. Everybody seems to find out, and it creates all kinds of demoralization and tension and resentment and anger within a nonprofit organization, a for-profit organization, a government agency. Well, government agencies, they will never go above the salary band because those are rules that have to be obeyed under law, usually. But so that's the issue of the midpoint. So what do you do in a negotiation? My advice is always the same. Let's say you know that the band is $50,000 to $60,000. You should ask for 57 or 58. Now, I know that sounds like a contradiction to what I just said, but hear me out. You ask for the 57 or 58, knowing that they're highly likely to negotiate you down to, let's say, 54. But you've given them the psychological satisfaction of negotiating you down. Okay, so it's a win on their side, and the HR person can tell their boss, or if it's not an HR person, they can tell their supervisor, oh, I negotiated that person down from 58 or 57 to 54. And so we got them under the midpoint. Okay, that's what this is all about. And, I know it sounds in some ways kind of just really overly simple and maybe even a little stupid, but it's not. There's a, from the standpoint of someone who spent the better part of 3 decades in management, it makes a lot of sense to have this midpoint in salary ranges. So when you have some relevant experience for a job, and by the way, I'm even talking about 3 months here and 6 months there. doing relevant internships, then you've got some reason to be negotiating upward within that salary band. Okay. Now, again, this is a little bit. I knew this was coming up in another slide. I've gotten a little ahead of myself. Find relevant data from sources like Glassdoor.com. Oh, also, I forgot about salary.com, payscale.com. GuideStar.org it's different than the others. It's or charity nav. Well, GuideStar.org does have information about nonprofits and salaries. There's another organization called Charity Navigator, and it will give you access to a nonprofit organization's IRS tax returns, which are called IRS Form 990. And in those forms, nonprofits must disclose the salaries of everyone working for them above a certain amount of money. It used to be $50,000, and I think it's gone up to 75 or something like that. And now, how does that help you if you're not anywhere near senior executive status? Because you can tell whether an organization pays well or not. There's a certain policy institute in town which is notably cheap in the way it pays people. It's a very well-known place, and someone was going to be negotiating there and asked me, this was a recent alum, well, what should I ask for? So I looked up the IRS 990 form for that think tank, and I was astonished to see that they only paid their chief executive a little bit over $100,000 a year, which is pretty low for a chief executive of a place that probably has 300 staff. In most cases, for a well-known organization like that, with that many staff, the CEO should be making above $250,000 a year, perhaps even $400,000 a year, because it's a lot of responsibility. So I was able to, and then I looked at, well, what are they paying their vice presidents? Because they're listed too. And these were people making not that much money at the time for senior executives, okay? $70,000 or $60,000, which means if you're coming in entry level, you're looking at being $20,000 or $30,000 less than that. And that, you can start making certain assumptions about how well-paying or cheap an employer is based upon what they pay senior executives if they're a nonprofit, okay? That kind of information is typically not available for a specific employer if they're not nonprofit, although it is available for federal agencies. Because, for example, and I'm citing numbers that I'm not entirely sure of, but a lot of people coming out of university, if you get a federal job, you're being hired at what's known as a GS7 level. If you've got a master's degree, you might be hired at a GS9 level. And there are specific salaries associated with those levels. The other thing to know about the federal government in particular is that, yes, there's a salary, but there's also a salary band. And each salary band has what they call steps. And I believe in the federal government, the last time I looked, there were 10 steps. And what that means is every year you're working in that job, you automatically move up a step in terms of getting more salary, okay? So the issue is, can you get the agency that's hiring you to bring you in at, let's say, GS7 step 5, which would be the midpoint, basically, of a 10-step scale, which would be, another probably at least $5,000, maybe $7,000 more than coming in at the lowest level. Just a digression and a little bit of a hint. A lot of federal agencies, when they hire people who are recent college graduates, will just say, it's GS7 step 1, that's all we can do. GS9 step 1, that's all we can do. And then you will move up in the step level as you get experience. So there's a lot of hardball, hard-nosed tactics that go on, particularly in federal agencies, state agencies too. If you were to get a job at some other state, particularly Maryland, Virginia, whatever. Also, you should know, and this is not a political comment, but it's just a statement of fact. Generally speaking, blue state governments are going to pay significantly better than red state governments. Okay, just because they're blue states and they value government and government services more. So there's that. Now, you can also, to some degree, determine what equivalent alumni from your major are earning, basically by asking them if they're willing to tell you. I say use LinkedIn. Actually, there's a better tool. It's called, and I should have updated this with that. There's something called Alumni Fire, all one word, ALUMNIFIRE. Alumni Fire is software that we have access to at AU, that you have access to, which, by the way, will, there's something like 3,500 or 4,000 alums who have volunteered to help mentor people in terms of finding jobs or finding internships, okay? And so that's a really neat tool just to know about. And in some cases, if you find people who are working for the exact employer you want to work for, and they're in a job that's pretty close to what you want to have, you might be willing to, you should ask them, and they might be willing to say, well, how much does this job pay at your employer? And they probably know, okay? Without even asking them, how much do you make, but how much does this pay at your employer? Someone has asked a question, is it inappropriate to ask the potential employer what the range is for the job? No, exactly what I'm saying is it is appropriate to ask that, for sure. What the range is for the job you're applying for. Yeah, I mean, when you're applying for a job, but what I'm saying is I would not ask that until I got to the salary negotiation. And I know that's frustrating because you're saying to yourself, maybe I'm applying for a job that doesn't pay very well. Maybe I want to make, I've got a master's degree and 2 years experience, and I want to make $70,000 or $80,000 a year, and maybe this job pays $55,000 a year. But the problem is, it is not to your advantage to bring up salary issues until they have made an offer. That's just a hard and fast rule. Now, you say, is it inappropriate to ask the employer? I assume you mean before they've made an offer. No, it's not. You can ask. But I would go to Glassdoor first, or payscale.com or salary.com, and try to find out if you can get information online without even asking the employer, okay? And then only think about the employer as a last resort unless and until they make you a job offer, okay? Hope that answers the question. If you have another question, I'm happy to follow up. Now, where was I here? Take good notes from this information. Yeah, take good notes from Glassdoor or whatever, so that you know what you're doing when you're trying to negotiate salary. You're negotiating with information behind you is always better than negotiating blind, right? Now, be ready to negotiate from the second interview onwards, because typically, if you haven't been in a situation where you've negotiated salary on a job, it's not like internships. Most internship interviewing is one and done. One interview, and they get back to you and say, we'd really like you to come and work for us next semester, or sorry, we've decided to go in another direction. And I love that phrase. Actually, I hate that phrase, but it's always deadly to hear that. But typically, decisions on whether to hire someone are made no sooner than a second interview, and almost always by a third interview. Okay. Now, whether they interview you in a second round, and right at the end of that, they say, okay, we're going to interview you. That doesn't happen very much. Typically, they'll get back to you. Okay. And might send you an email. We'd like to offer you the job, and here's the contract, and we're offering this salary, and we hope you'll accept. And, and they try to, basically, to use a basketball expression, they try to slam dunk you into accepting what is usually the lowest salary they're going to offer you, okay? And understand that HR staff are really good at rushing you into accepting their first and lowest offer. That's what they usually do, especially in a place like the federal government or a government contractor, okay? I mean, I learned a lot about this from my daughter in particular. I've never worked for the federal government or a federal contractor, and I spent a lot of my life abroad, which is not a totally relevant experience in terms of salary negotiation. But my daughter had worked for a series of government contractors. She's in her early 30s now. And once she got a bit of experience and also got a master's degree in a skill that is in heavy demand, people would make her offers and she would say, well, no, I can't accept that. She was ready to walk away. But of course, if you're new to all this, and also, you know, if you're a student, if you're a senior, or if you're a second-year grad student, and you're thinking, boy, I really need a job, it's hard to say to yourself, I got to be ready to walk away from this. Once you're in a situation where you've already got a job and you get another offer, you do need to adopt an attitude of, you know, if I don't get the offer I want, I'm walking away from this. Okay. It's a powerful position to be in. There may be some regret later on, but usually not. And so point is, you need to be ready to slow down the process. And as you see with that bulldozer down at the bottom there, not be bulldozed into accepting a lower offer. How do you slow down the process? They make an offer, ask for a day or two to consider it. That's when, if you haven't done enough research with Glassdoor, salary.com, etc., maybe you want to be doing that. And then you want to have the legendary one-pager in your back pocket. Someone asked, will it be possible to get a copy of the presentation? Yes, what I'd like you to do, in fact, I'll do it right now. Can I? There doesn't seem to be a way for me to type into the Q&A. I'm going to type into the chat my email address. Hopefully you can all see that right now. It's robert.sangeorge@american.edu. And send me an email, and I'll be happy to send you a PDF of the presentation, okay? I don't want to just blast it out to everybody who's here, but rather deal with you one-on-one if you really want it. Now, the one-pager, here it is, okay? It's not your resume, okay? You list every relevant job or internship think of it as a 2-column document. You list every relevant job or internship on one side. And on the right side, right column, you list the number of months you worked there. If you have a master's degree, at the bottom of that list master of whatever it is, if you're going to have a master's degree or already have one, and add 24 months experience to it. Why? The federal government used to automatically give people the benefit of well, I don't want to say benefit of the doubt. Used to credit people with 24 months experience if they had a master's degree. Okay, they don't do that anymore, but some employers will, and you could just say master's degree equals 24 months on top of whatever job and internship experience you have. Then at the bottom, you add up the months and you divide by 12. I've got 3 years and 4 months of relevant experience. And you see the value of this. Then you're saying, well, I don't want to just come in at the bottom of the salary range at $50,000. I want to be asking for 57 or something like that, based upon the experience I've gotten. So you're backing up your salary negotiation with something that's quantifiable and something that they've got not in their hand, unless they printed it out, but something that you've sent them via email, okay, as an attachment. And so it's important to have that ready so that, well, as I say, so that you can argue with specificity why you should be paid more. And yeah, that's all of that. I don't see any other questions at the moment, so I'm going to keep going. What is and is not negotiable? Let's talk about that. Obviously, salary, okay? Your starting date is negotiable within reason, okay? Once you go past 30 days, let's say an employer tells you they want you to start, let's say you're a May graduate, okay? And an employer says, well, we're looking for you to start May 15th or June. Let's just pick a date and say May 15th. The most you can reasonably expect them to delay that is maybe 30 days. Okay, so you're looking at June 15th. And even that's pushing it a bit with American employers. European employers, by the way, I mean, where I worked a lot of my life, are much more flexible on that, because in European countries, you often have to give, you're under law in many countries, France is one, you have to give 3 months notice that you're leaving, or else you can't leave, you're eligible for penalties and stuff. Anyway, that's not the case in the US, because the US is an economy that's more in a hurry. And so starting dates are somewhat flexible within reason, okay? But don't try to tell them, yeah, I was planning on backpacking in Europe, so can I start on September 1st, even though I'm graduating in May? That's not going to work, okay? You've got to show a certain interest in starting, in meeting them, not just halfway, but meeting them most of the way on the starting date. How are you going to work? Is it going to be hybrid? Is it going to be remote? Is it going to be full time in the office? Generally speaking, that's in the job description, and your ability to change that is limited. Okay, in the DC area, the DC job market is the most remote work job market in the country, and by that I don't mean fully remote, but remote or hybrid. And I think you understand why. The vast bulk of the jobs here can be done remotely. Okay, you're not a barista at Starbucks where you got to be there. There's no remote work in that situation. Now, if they call, some employers actually call hybrid 4 days a week, which frankly is ridiculous. But what you may have to do, what you probably will have to do, if they say, yes, we want you to work on a hybrid schedule and you can work at home on Fridays, and you're thinking, I was thinking more 3 days a week, maybe even 2 days a week in the office, probably you will have very little ability to negotiate that unless you've been working for them for a while and you're past a probationary period, okay? Because one of the reasons they'll want you in the office is to be able to supervise you more closely, okay? American University, just to give you an example, the standard for staff, I mean, faculty have to be here when they're teaching classes and they have to have certain office hours, so it's a different situation. For staff, it's typically 3 days a week. Certain staff in certain parts of the university have been able to move to 2 days a week in the office. But the university still feels strongly about, having a fair, in-person presence for your job a certain amount of time, particularly with your supervisors and with the people you work with, the team. It's important, and I agree totally it is. So the extent to which a job is hybrid or not could possibly be negotiable. Maybe they would agree that after 6 months, you could go from 4 days a week to 2 days a week, something like that. I mean, I just kind of throwing out ideas here. Now, if they're going to have you work hybrid or fully remote, as a lot of jobs are now, I mean, certainly more than half, will the employer provide you with a phone? And they'll pay the phone bill, by the way. Will they provide you with a laptop that you can, take from home and bring into the office and plug it in to a bigger screen and, that sort of thing? Will they provide you with if you need a bigger screen in terms of the kind of work you do, bigger than a laptop screen, would they provide you with that kind of a screen? Remember, my family has that kind of situation, and when the pandemic erupted in, I remember it was the third week of March of 2020, the supervisor came around, said, here's a laptop and here's a phone, and they were both secure things because of the agency she was with, and he said, go home and only use those things to work. Oh, and by the way, if you need bigger screens, which she does, you can check the screens out on loan, and work with your bigger screens that you plug into your laptop. So she didn't have to negotiate that. Of course, she was already working there. But so will they provide a laptop? Will they provide a phone that they'll pay for? Which of course is nice, because that's something you don't have to pay for on a monthly basis, unless you want to have your own private number in addition. Okay. And is there certain kind of training that you want to get? There may be things in the job description, a certain kind of software that you don't know how to use. You want to be sure that, first of all, they'll provide the training and will do it in a timely way so that you're not starting the job for the first several months without the training in this crucial software, whatever it is. And also other kinds of professional growth opportunities. And it's hard to say what that might be, but I mean, I'll give you an example from myself. When I first started at AU, I was given an opportunity to do a 2-day training with a group, and training was done by a psychologist who also was a veteran career advisor. And she talked about sort of the psychology of career advising and, the kind of issues you run into. And it was very valuable. It was not mandatory. It was just sort of offered, and AU was willing to pay for this. And it was something I really benefited from. And by the way, AU benefited a lot from it in terms of my work. You also can discuss future opportunities for promotion, but understand nobody's going to guarantee you a promotion. Yeah, in 6 months, we'll give you a promotion and you'll make $10,000 a year more at that point. That almost never happens. They may say there is a possibility that after a year you could be eligible for a promotion, but we can't say anything more definite than that because it all depends on your work and our evaluation of your work, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. What is not negotiable? Health insurance is never negotiable. You're going to get the same health plan that the CEO gets. Okay. And that's the way it is. That's federal law. The 401k, or if you're with a nonprofit, it's called a 403b. Those kind of pension plans, which is the employer contributes part and you contribute part, that's the same plan for everybody. Now, the employer will contribute more if you have a higher salary, so management employees will get more contribution into their plan percentage-wise. But let's say the employer says, we'll contribute 5% gross of your salary, but you have to contribute 5% of your salary into the plan. And so in other words, for every percent you contribute up to 5% or 7%, we'll contribute some. But that plan is, that's not negotiable. Okay. You want to know what that plan is, particularly so that if maybe you've got 2 job offers and you can compare the benefits to each other. Okay. Vacation time is generally only negotiable when you're further on in your career. Initially, and because in the US, people, as a culture, we don't value vacations, particularly the way people do in Europe. They're likely to say 2 weeks, that's it, and you will be accumulating that time. So you're really not going to have 2 weeks until you've been there a year, and you'll have minimal time off at that point. And then they'll also say what holidays you get. So besides Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, 4th of July, I don't know, Memorial Day weekend and Labor Day weekend, MLK weekend, and I don't think, I'm not sure all employers actually give that. AU also gives the Juneteenth holiday. You want to know how many holidays you're going to have. That's not negotiable, of course. However, if you are of a different role, if you're not a Christian, okay, because you're still going to get Christmas Day and Christmas Eve off, but you've got other holidays that you want to have off, like Yom Kippur, for example. You want to be sure that that's observed with the employer, okay, and also so that hopefully you don't have to use vacation time to take off the most important religious holiday on the calendar of your religion. All right, so there is some negotiating posture there for things like that. Sick leave is the same for everybody, okay. And typically, and again, most American employers just don't value providing people with adequate sick leave most of the time. And you'll accumulate a certain number of days. Typically, some employers it's like 5 days. Most it would be like 2 weeks. And then what happens is at the end of a year, if you haven't used any, it's wiped out, and you have to accumulate the 5 days or 10 days working days. All over again in the next year. It happens a lot, but government contractors do that a lot. Federal government is better about that. Nonprofits, it depends. Larger nonprofits will have in general, will have better benefits than smaller nonprofits, aside from the issue of salaries. And there's other minor benefits, the ability to get dental insurance or pet insurance or et cetera. And that's just, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference in your overall compensation picture. How negotiable are family benefits? I assuming you mean like maternity or paternity leave. Usually not negotiable. They either do it or they don't. Okay. And I don't think, you could You can try, but understand that if an employer doesn't already offer, let's say, 6 weeks maternity leave, that they're not going to, and you're going to say, well, can I at least have a month? And they're probably going to say no, and why? Because if they don't want to do it, and if state law, federal law, I don't think requires either maternity or paternity leave, I believe. There's been a movement to require it, but I don't think it's passed. And some states do require it. And I don't ask me about the state laws in Maryland and Virginia and DC. I just don't know. You'd have to check into that. But if the states don't require it, you can see an employer's position is, well, if I give you a month maternity leave, I got to give everybody else a month maternity leave who asks for it, right? Because legally that puts the employer in an indefensible position to give it to some people but not others. If you're talking about things like bereavement, death in the family, usually most employers, even if they don't have a policy about it, will let you have a couple of days off, but maybe not much more than that. I can't, if there are other family benefits that I'm not thinking of that you're interested in asking about, ask me, although I may not have the answers to that. And because largely that falls into a mostly non-negotiable category. And so it just depends. Okay. But ask on if you got other questions about that stuff. How to accept a job offer graciously. You want to indicate that you're happy. You may have gone through a tough negotiation that might even make you feel a little resentful, like, I think they should have paid me $5,000 more. But you got to accept graciously, show enthusiasm, and start asking about what reading preparation you can do before your first day on the job. You want them to know that, hey, I'm so enthusiastic about working here, I'll do a little bit of work before I start working. Okay. That sort of thing is important. And by the way, a couple of other things I haven't mentioned. With larger employers, sometimes they have a cafeteria and the food is subsidized. I was with an employer that was not part of the World Bank, but it was with the World Bank, and we were in the World Bank's offices, and the World Bank has this pretty incredible cafeteria operation. It's a dining operation with really good food, and it's significantly subsidized. And I would sometimes see people sneaking out of there with doggy bags because they were taking them home and probably having dinner that way too. Sometimes that's available, but not very many employers are going to do that. You probably heard stories about high-tech employers where basically they want you to live there almost. And in the evening, they will come around with food carts that are usually pretty good from what I've read. Places like Google and Apple will do things, and other big tech employers, because the idea is they just want you to work all the time. And so, and some have even given benefits like you have access to a personal concierge who will take out deal with your dry cleaning or your laundry. I have read, however, that stuff for a lot of technology firms is fading away. For I don't know if it's just a cost issue or whatever. Probably also because a lot of people are working remotely, so you're not going to get free food if you're not at the office, and you're not going to get somebody to take care of your dry cleaning if you're not in the office. But those are benefits available to certain kinds of people who are expected to work enormously long hours, and that's another thing to understand. If you're looking for a job with a management consulting firm, most of them are notorious for wanting you to work 80-hour weeks. And I'm not kidding. Now, it also depends on the kind of job, but if you're in a staff consultant role and you're on a high-performing team, they will generally expect you to work. They'll pay you a lot of money. I've seen people come right out of undergraduate programs at AU who got job offers with major firms, and I remember one person came to me and said, well, they're only offering me $90,000 a year. can I ask for more? And, at that, this was 10 years ago when $90,000 was a lot of money, okay, to be a little sarcastic about it. And I just said, look, I wouldn't, I can tell you a little bit about how to negotiate up, but that's a lot of money in terms of your experience level and what they want you to do. But I also said to her, you better think about what they want in return for $90,000 a year, $30,000 to $40,000 above what you might make anywhere else. The amount of work they want out of you on a per day basis is usually pretty significant, and usually you're talking 6 days a week. They want you in there on Saturday. They'll probably give you Sundays off if you're lucky. But with those high salaries at those consulting firms come demands for high number of hours worked. And at a certain point, and again, I wouldn't do this until you were negotiating. You'd want to know, well, what is expected? What is the work-life balance here? And hopefully they'll give you an honest answer. And so that's one other thing to be thinking about. So I don't see any other. Let's see. I think this is the last slide. Yes, it is indeed. So I'll just go back to that one. We've been at this for almost 50 minutes now. If you have any other questions, shoot them really fast out of the Q&A or the chat. Otherwise, I will sign off. Here's the thing. Salary negotiating is tough. Unless you're, I got really good and confident about it by the time I was 10 years out of my master's degree, because I knew I had a record to run on, and in some cases I was being recruited. And by the way, when dealing with recruiters, which maybe I should talk about for a moment, you can be much more open with recruiters early on. What does this pay, roughly speaking? And the recruiters will know, okay, if you're contacted by a recruiter. Generally speaking, people who are early in their careers don't get contacted by recruiters unless you have a high level skill and demand. If you're getting a Master of Science degree in data science, you may well be contacted by recruiters. If you are getting a master's degree in accounting, you may well be contacted by recruiters. I mean, I know that from my daughter's own experience. And if you're in hard science, certain kinds of hard science, and MS in computer science, again, those kind of things are in demand. If you've got certain language abilities that are rare, I'm not talking about Spanish now or French, I'm talking about Mandarin, other languages that are in significant demand. And I'm thinking more about the private sector than government, although government could well be looking for you. But the federal government doesn't employ recruiters, as far as I know. If you've got something that is worth a lot to an employer, that can up your salary level. For example, applying for a job that requires someone who is bilingual Spanish probably should pay at least $5,000 a year more for an entry-level job than a job would pay if it weren't going to require bilingual Spanish. So even with a widely spoken language like Spanish or French, if you've got that skill and if it's required for the job, that has to be worth something, $5,000 to $10,000 more than you might make otherwise for a job that didn't require that language. So certain skills are worth a lot of money. Languages, data analytics, computer science, high-level quant skills, that sort of thing, okay? Anyway, I think I've talked enough. I'll let you go, and good luck in your salary negotiations. The job market is good in the DC area, and generally in the country it's good, despite what some news outlets would say. This is a pretty good economy. Unemployment is at like a 30-year low. You wouldn't know that from a lot of the hysteria that you hear about in some places. And the job market in this city, in the DC area, is quite good. So you should go in with what I would say cautious confidence that you can land something, but you got to start looking ahead of time. If you're graduating in May, you want to start looking for a job no later than January, let's say late January, February 1st. And you should be applying for a minimum of 3 to 5 jobs a month, okay? Unless maybe you've got somebody on the inside of a particular employer who is, you know, definitely going to get you into that employer. But if you're applying like a lot of people are, you know, without that kind of advantage, by March 1st, if you're a May grad, you want to be applying to 5 jobs a week at least. You want to put the power of the math of applying to all those jobs in your favor, and you want to be you know, generating. Typically, you should anywhere from 10% to 20% of the jobs you apply for. If you're being reasonable about what you're applying for in terms of your skill set and your experience, you should be getting 10 to 20% of those employers contacting you for interviews, at least first round interviews. Okay. If you're not getting past first round interviews, then there's a problem with the way you're interviewing, and you should be going to a career advisor about interview skills. Okay. And that doesn't just mean mock interviews. It means talking all about interviewing, what's it about, what it's about, and how to prepare, and those sorts of things. And AU has a very robust career advising system for all the various schools. It works in different ways for different schools, but it's a good system. So again, I'll let you go. Good luck and good job hunting.